If there is one thing we can always count on in a good science fiction game, it's the sheer enjoyment we can get out of learning how the work of arrogant scientists ended up being their undoing, usually in hilarious and gruesome ways. This was a constant in Fallout games, and Bethesda's newest sci-fi entry, Starfield, carries on this proud tradition. The quality of shenanigans present here is Vault-Tec worthy, in my opinion. Today, we are at the Kreet Research Lab, one of the first areas we explore in the game, declared out of Crimson Fleet pirates. It is here we learn about the xenomorph weaponization program here, Project Petshop, and how it all went wrong. Spoiler, they attempted to control an alien species a little above their weight class. This is my first video on Starfield, so I would appreciate any support you can offer. Likes and comments really help the video's overall performance and how the algorithm favours it. If you've any suggestions on other places in this game you'd like me to cover, please leave them in the comment section or on one of my community posts. If this video does well, you can definitely expect more Starfield content. Now, let's take a look at this insane research facility. Immediately inside, we can find the place in a state of disarray. Containers and canisters are strewn about the place, and it has that authentic "I've just been looted by some bastards" look to it. This tracks as we are following some Crimson Fleet pirates here. However, some of the things in this entrance make it look like the previous occupants were just here, such as the powered-on computer terminals and the coffee mug and chair left in front of them. Progressing up the stairs, we can find yet more evidence of habitation. More coffee mugs and food just left out, likely by those who used to work here. Lockers still filled with loot, showing the fleet hasn't managed to clear the place out just yet. Heading up the stairs again, we can find our first body, or I suppose first victim, in a room on the right. They are lying in what we assume is a pool of their own blood, and the body looks like it suffered a fair amount of damage from freezing. This is likely due to the facility's life support systems failing after being uninhabited for so long. We can see that they are a researcher or scientist of some sort. The badge says medical clearance, but that is likely just a result of the model. Given that this is a storage cupboard of sorts, we can assume that they came in here either to hide or drag themselves to safety. There isn't any blood leading into the room, so I think it's safe to assume they were either injured here or killed here. Also, I just want to take a second to address the possible jumping or staggering nature of the footage. From what I have read online, this seems to be an issue, and some reviewers have also had problems with it. I apologise for that, if it is noticeable. It will hopefully be fixed in a patch or something later. After this, we can continue down past a few more abandoned desks, to reach what looks like a cafeteria. Before getting there, I do want to point out that it looks like this facility was still being set up in some way. A lot of the chairs, lockers and containers were still being moved about, which wouldn't necessarily be ordinary for a facility of this scale. We will find quite a few terminals later that give us a decent amount of information regarding the timeline of events here, but for now just keep in mind that things may still have been being set up here. I don't think it's likely that the Crimson Fleet here would be so organised as they've done all this themselves. The cafeteria itself looks to be where the fleet started to set up, as we can begin to find a lot of containers having been broken into and opened. However, the strange thing is the lack of bodies. Given the proximity to the exit, when we find out what happened here, I would have thought more people would have fled in this direction, or at the least would have run from here if they were here eating. But there's nothing. No blood, no bodies, not even any plungers in the toilets. It is possible that where we find them all is the furthest they could manage to flee to, but still, I find it just a little strange. Moving on to the living quarters, we get our first bit of information regarding the horrific incident here. I'll let you have a listen to that now.
The Terrormorph is loose! I repeat, the Terrormorph is loose! Do not engage! If you can reach help.
Oh man, that was the best!
Classic United Colonies. Put something in a cage until it kills you.
One more time!
So, we have someone called Wynn screaming that something called the Terrormorph has gotten loose, and then what sounds like them either being injured or killed. Honestly, I think it's probably the latter. Now, frustratingly enough, this sounds like a slate the pirates are playing, from the dialogue we get. However, try as I might, I cannot find it. not as an item out in the open, on a pirate, or as something the terminals can access. If anyone has found it, if it does exist, please let me know, as I spent way too long looking at every surface and checking bodies. Up here, on the left, we can find the first room in the living quarters, and given the terminal here, this was likely Wynn's room, the person through whom we shall discover the details of this facility. There are a total of 4 beds here, so either he had 3 roommates, or with such a grand fromage, he got them all to himself. Given his position, as we shall later see, the latter could be the case. Regardless, we know that at least someone here cared about core strength, given the exercise ball. The place still looks lived in, again driving home that no one here really had the opportunity to evacuate. Now, let's take a gander at this terminal. The first entry is titled New Beginning. Note the date is January 13th, 2306. The game begins on May 7th, 2330. So everything we are about to learn happened between 24 and 20 years ago. He's gotten a new post in the new UC Xenowarfare division, which was created for the purpose of exploring the utility of alien species in warfare. His position, at least right now, is Associate Xenobiology Technician, and their new job has taken them away from Amanda, who we can assume is either a girlfriend or a wife. They've been kept in the dark about their posting, and as we shall soon see, it didn't actually start out here on Kreet. The next entry is Candidate 1, a few weeks later. They get access to what they say is a giant spider-like species. Someone called Mikkelsen was encased in a cocoon, trying to attach a neural control interface to the thing. As we shall later see, they did survive this. The creature, however, did not. Bit harsh, if you ask me. Someone called Paulson informs the others that another creature will soon be delivered. From the name Neural Control Interface, it's clear they were attempting to tame or control the aliens they brought here. Entry 3 is about an Ashta specimen, which is actually from Freestar Collective Space, as you will know if you've progressed far enough in the game. They comment that its predatory qualities are exactly what they're looking for, so it seems likely at this point to conclude that their intentions are to utilize them for combat, not just to domesticate or tame them for benign purposes. Hayden wonders if the FC has managed to weaponize their greatest predator, the Ashta themselves. However, by Entry 4, titled Trial Failure, just 2 days later, they conclude this is not the case. They talk about it being resistant to something called synchronization, and the control fidelity never exceeding 47%. Someone called Chin almost got their arm taken off as a result. I'm not sure why it wasn't still sedated or locked in a cage when this happened, but sure, even a scientist can be a smooth brain sometimes. He arrogantly asserts this must mean that the FC couldn't have done it, because the UC can't. So, they decide to move on to another species. The synchronization is likely related to the NCI integrating with the creature in question, so it seems to be an important factor directly affecting how well it can be controlled. Next is an entry titled More Disappointment, 5 days after the last one. The reason for the title for this may have been related to the extreme alien nature of the specimen in question, so much so that they seem to have had an issue actually categorizing it. Whatever it was extremely poisonous in nature. Given how many people have been injured in their previous field attempts, maybe not the worst thing in the world that they didn't succeed. The second last entry is titled New Specimens, and takes place almost 2 months after the last one. Now, things are shaping up. A type of arthropod, or as they describe it, space lobster, has been dropped off without warning. Apparently the aggressive nature of all the previous subjects is what led to the failure of the NCI. This is important for what happens later on. Remember this. They state that these new creatures were perfect due to their non-aggressive disposition, but they were still highly effective in combat when threatened. Their last entry is just under a month later, on August 1st. They relocate to the homeworld of the arthropods, and Hayden has been named Senior Xenobiologist. Apparently Mikkelsen helped them with this, and yes, they did in fact get out of the cocoon the giant spider, in my opinion, rightfully placed them in. Paulson seems to have been forced out due to a lack of results. As I'm sure you've already guessed, that relocation was to Kreet. So this facility was used to research the application of the NCI, the Neural Control Interface, to various alien species, in order to utilize them in combat, which we shall get more information on later. After having several failures, they finally found a species that was, by its nature, non-aggressive, but still effective in combat. Their attempts with aggressive species always went badly. Again, if a species was aggressive, it was, through past trials, a bad idea to try and control them. Also, I just want to take a moment to talk about this message on the wall here. If it's from the scientists who were here, fair enough. But if the Crimson Fleet pirates put this here, that's a petty move. Down the corridor, we can reach the first lab, and it's a total shitshow. I mean, it's just exactly what you'd expect the worst case scenario from scientists trying to control aliens. There's bodies everywhere, there's blood everywhere. Things did not end well here. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is this large head floating in this tank. Initially, I thought it may have been samples of the other creatures that were experimented on here, but after closer examination of the creature we shall find later, this is definitely its head. Note the strange growths around what I would call its neck and throat area. I assume this was taken in order to research how better to apply the NCI to a living subject, which is what they do, as we shall get to, and what caused all of this. Next to this tank, we find our second body at the terminus of a large streak of blood. I think it's likely that they were badly wounded and they managed to drag themselves to this tank, before they then died. Surrounding them are some heat leeches, which we shall get to later. More parts of the creature, or its species, I suppose you could say, can be found both in the tank beside the body, and on the table beside it. From these, the head and the claws beside what looks like a limb, this thing was huge. Beside the limb, we can find this very interesting whiteboard drawing that someone spent way too much time on. From what I can tell, this seems to have been describing an experiment with the NCI on this creature, possibly the last experiment that was carried out here, which might give you a clue as to what tore through this place. The number of tentacles, or mandibles, seems to match the number on the head in the tank, so we can assume it is the same creature. So whatever that thing is, one of its kind seems to have been an experiment subject here when things went wrong. Given Wynn's message, at this point it is reasonable to conclude that this was the Terrormorph they mentioned, and spoiler, though not really as we're just about to read about it, it totally is. To the left of all of this, we find a smash containment area with a large number of both 2 and 4 claw marks on it and surrounding it. Additionally, the fluid has some microbial contamination in it, so whatever this thing was, it was a dirty bastard. Moving through the rest of the lab, this Terrormorph clearly tore through these scientists like wet tissue paper. They've been absolutely butchered, and it makes you wonder where the security team was. They are mentioned later, but unlike in other places we find, there are no UC security teams present here. Additionally, given the sheer number of people here, I think this answers our earlier query of why there was only one other body near the entrance to the facility. They simply never got the chance to get any further. The Terrormorph broke containment and quickly killed them all, likely before they even got further than a few meters. More sections of the body of this creature can be found in more of the tanks, representing other parts taken from some other Terrormorph specimens. To the left of them, we can find yet another terminal, giving us some more details about the research here. The first entry is titled Project Petshop, and takes place over half a year after their last one, now having relocated to Kreet. They state the facility is fully operational, no expense having been spared. Additionally, it's actually located in Freestar Collective Space, so it's nice to know that the human tradition of conducting highly dangerous research in an enemy's territory, as opposed to their own, has continued into the 24th century. They finish by arrogantly comparing their work to the Manhattan Project. Just under a month later is the next entry on the anthropods of Kreet. They have a very high fidelity rate of 97% and can do just fine in pretty much any environment, including no oxygen, oddly enough. Or at least I find it odd. I'm sure there are some biologists watching that could give examples of animals that can function without oxygen, and no, a fish is not an example of that. The only thing that immediately comes to mind, for me anyway, is maybe tardigrades. They go on to say that the anthropods are already being integrated with the Red Devils. Now, that's a topic that we will unravel as more information on the game lore comes out. To summarise, they're a Spec Ops arm of the UC that hailed primarily from Mars, many of them having the red eyes characteristic of Martians, and, as a result, the name the Red Devils. The third entry is titled Success, and occurs about 5 months after the last one. the anthropods are so effective that they are now seen as a backbone species for xenowarfare. Their designation is Stalkers. As you can probably guess, they are, in fact, the Kreet stalkers we encounter on the surface of Kreet, usually seen eating the grazers. Their final entry is 5 days later, and covers the Red Devils specifically. Their success with the creatures has been amazing, according to Hayden, and he believes that they're ready for a field test. Now, I have a lot of issues with this, as they apparently want to go and pick a fight with the spider species that almost killed Mikkelsen in the initial tests. Almost as if it wasn't completely justified, trying to kill its captors, when they attempted to turn it into a living combat drone. Well, at least their comeuppance is swiftly approaching. Continuing up the stairs, we come to the strangest thing here. A cafeteria/breakroom area, overlooking the research area with dissected specimens and live ones? I don't understand why this was here, as we already passed through another cafeteria that I assume was functional. Up here, we can find a few more bodies, again, just torn apart. One of them looks like they were taken out while carrying a tray, so they may not even have had the time to drop what they were doing and run, highlighting the speed at which this creature tore through the facility. To the left, we can find a room where they seem to have carried out some experiments on heat leeches, a few of which we can find in this facility. They may have been beginning the project we find out about later, but we'll get to that. The real thing of interest here is this whiteboard, which gives us our first real look at this creature, and more details regarding the experimentation on it. So first of all, I want you to look at the ribcage, the number of claws that match the marks on the floor, and the head. This drawing clearly matches many of the body parts we can locate in this facility, such as the head and ribs, or the abdomen section, along with the limbs. So this is the Terrormorph, the creature that tore through this facility, and its researchers. Now from the diagram, they mention extracting the cells from a captured specimen, applying or administering to said cells tumor growth, and then selecting a bottleneck from the dominant clones, then identifying them. The last part states something that I think is triple helix DNA analysis, but I'm not 100% on that. There is also a series of arrows pointing to the tumor growth and the Terrormorph's head, with what looks like in vitro versus in vivo. Now the diagram next to the head growth does indeed look like a tumor, so here's what I think happened. They took the cells from a captured specimen, which we'll get into, applied a growth, and derived a tumor from it. They were looking for dominant clones. However, it is specified at the top of the board it was clone cells, not a Terrormorph clone. So I wonder if, given the arrows pointing to the head, were they attempting to insert these clone cells or tumors into the Terrormorph in order to allow them to control it? We don't have enough information on what this clone cell was, unfortunately, nor do we know how rare these creatures are, or how they got one here, though we'll soon get some information on that. So, we shall have to come back to this later. Moving deeper into the facility to get more information, we find a few more bodies here, allowing us to somewhat track the path of destruction of the Terrormorph. Some poor bastard looks like they were horribly injured in their chair, and then chose to drag themselves towards a wall, for some reason. I know I'm making a lot of assumptions that the Terrormorph didn't move them, but given the speed with which this supposedly happened, I think people being wounded, then left to die, is likelier. The funniest one is the poor fucker by the door here, who died with a medpack in hand. Given the state of the bodies and the amount of blood, I really don't think it would have helped, to be honest. Next we can enter Research 2, and this part of the facility doesn't look like it was focused on the Terrormorph project as much. There's a whiteboard at the far end that just says Controllable Species, and then underneath it it's just blank. I thought that was pretty funny. To the right of that we can enter Testing 1, and find the second last terminal present in this space. Entry 1 is titled War, and I believe this is in reference to the beginning of the Colony Wars. Again, a whole other video topic. But to summarize, it was a war between colonies. Summary over. Jokes aside, we do get some interesting information about how this particular war kicked off. The FC established a colony on Vesta, in direct violation of a treaty that was specifically put in place to stop this type of tomfoolery. The Red Devils were deployed to Vesta, and along with the Stalkers, had an overwhelming victory, with apparently no casualties at all. At least Hayden admits the facility they're doing research at also violates the same treaty, as it's literally in FC space, but they are hypocrites so they don't care. This all happened about 6 months after their last entry, so presumably the Red Devils and Stalkers have had a few successful deployments at this point. The second entry is the beginning of the end. They got approval for the next phase of Project Pet House, due to the success of the Red Devils. The entry after this, Stalkers, says they have stopped working on them. They apparently have enough in the field, and if the casualties are as low as they say they are, this makes sense. Creating more of them seems to be just as easy as whacking an NCI on a Kreet Stalker anyway. The following entry about heat leeches gives us a good amount of background on the wee shites. They can be found on pretty much every world and settlement, and on most ships. They siphon heat via an endothermic process, and due to this reduce the efficiency of the engines they attach themselves to by as much as 5%. It seems that they are enormously resistant to fluctuations in temperature, if they can in fact take an afterburn directly and be fine. He states they are innocuous, which I think is widely inaccurate. They do attack you and can damage you, but this does explain the various massage stations for the heat leeches around the facility. They were trying to weaponize them. As far as we know, they never progressed much on this research front. The rest of the lab here seems to have the bulk of their other research specimens, though we are not told what they actually are. Along with this is more preserved remains of a Terrormorph. The creature tore through here in the same manner as the rest of the facility, and it's clear the scientists here never had a chance either, as they don't seem to have been any more successful in fleeing than the poor sods in the last lab. Up the stairs, we can find a few of the cages where they likely shipped in other specimens. They're empty now, and there are no other entries regarding new creatures, excepting the Terrormorph, so we can't know if, in the process of this thing escaping, did anything else get released, or into a fight with a Terrormorph. After this, we can find Hayden Wynn himself, dead beside his desk. It seems like in his last moments, he was trying to look at his mug that says, "I put the I in team," which is just the perfect mug to show how arrogant this arsehole was. Also on their desk is his first emergency slate, and the final terminal here, which we shall take a look at first. Entry 1 is titled Terrormorph Specimen, and takes place about 2 years after the last entry. He identifies the Terrormorph as an alpha predator, and the first contact with the species seems to have been over 100 years ago on a remote moon. A moon it didn't seem to originate from, and was alone on, raising the question of how it got its food, or got there in the first place. My mind immediately goes to it being a manufactured bioweapon of, as of right now, unknown origin, given the information this facility gives us. It was called the Killing Machine, but the UC Marines just called it the Terrormorph. Now given Hayden says that it was taken down when first encountered, we can assume this is not a one-off creature, and can in fact be found in other places in the galaxy. We aren't given any other information here on where they got it from, or how widespread they are. The last entry is 5 days later, when they try and fit the NCI. I assume everything went wrong because the sedation window, the time in which the sedatives would keep the creature asleep to allow the NCI to be attached, was either much shorter, or in fact didn't work at all. To get more information, we need to listen to Haydens First emergency slate.
It's loose. The Terrormorph is loose. We can't stop it. When we tried to sync with the neural control interface, it just completely flipped out. Broke through its containment chamber like it was made out of paper. It killed Michelson, Cobb, and Sumantri in all of 1 minute. I'm not even sure where it is now. It took off deeper into the facility. A security detail went in after it, but good friggin' luck. When I know it's safe, I'm going to make a run for the comm relay. Try to call in the cavalry. This is Hayden Wynn, lead xenobiologist. Wishing he had gone to dentist school like his parents wanted.
So according to this, the sedation window was adequate. The issue arose when they tried to use the NCI. This either enraged the creature, or it was just waiting for an opportunity and attacked. Michelson finally got what he deserved after trying to get more giant spiders killed. Now the question remains where Hayden was when this happened. He died at his desk, not by the comm relay, and he talks about it moving deeper into the facility, which, given we've plotted its route, should have taken it past, or more likely, through him. Unless of course he wasn't in the lab at the time, but then he was the lead here, and would have been present for the experiment. Regardless, he says he is going to lie low, then try and get some help using the comms. In the room next to his, beside another body, we get his last emergency slate that tells us how that turned out.
We're dead. We're all dead. The comms relay has been trashed. The whole room is trashed. We can't call for help. I can hear the Terrormorph roaring somewhere. And more people screaming.
So apparently the Terrormorph managed to wreck the comms room, and at this point, Hayden has given up and accepted their death, or at least lost all hope. Now, since we heard what, at least in my opinion, was them dying at the hands of the Terrormorph when we entered the living quarters, this slate must predate it. However, he sounds far more animated in that instance. Moreover, given the speed at which this seems to have occurred, if he had had the time to record 2 slates before this, then who was the last message for? Everyone else would either already be aware, or would already be dead. In fact, given that its path led to Wynn's office, I think that either he, or the person we find near the roof access at the back, were the last to die. In which case, I think this is meant to be a wider broadcast, possibly to the exterior of the facility as well. I say this because the Terrormorph is still on Kreet, and we can find it at a pipeline near the research facility. Now when we get here, we don't just have it to worry about. There are already 2 Vahron members here as well. You know, the space cult that worships a big celestial snake? Yeah, that one. Why they were here at all, specifically at this pipeline. It can't be for any other reason apart from the Terrormorph, right? Now, Starfield is only out, and I'm still putting a lot of the lore together, like many of you. I have no doubt that this particular creature and this particular cult are, in some way, connected. The fact that it was first found alone on a random moon reeks of bioweapon engineering to me. Additionally, I find it odd that its response, as soon as someone else attempted to interface with and control it, was so violent. Perhaps a type of defense mechanism, meant to stop anyone else from utilizing it as a weapon, placed there by those who created it. This also isn't the first time a facility doing research related to alien species has been attacked by the Vahron. Star Station RE-939 comes to immediate mind, which is another place I plan to make a video on. To keep the spoilers to a minimum, we arrive there to get research data after the Vahron have attacked it for some mysterious reason. So perhaps a theme there, even given the small amount of information we have for the beginning of the game. The Terrormorph itself has 6 legs, a pair of 2 clawed limbs at the front and back, and a pair of 4 clawed ones in the middle. As you can see, this was definitely the creature we saw in the vats back in the lab. The head matches as well, and indeed it does have 7 mandibles, which is, to be honest, really strange, as you'd expect there to be a certain degree of symmetry. It could be that, in general, for this species, that is the case, and this is just evidence that they did indeed clone the creature. The terminal entries never tell us where they got it from, or if they ever had more than one of them, so it makes sense they would try. However, from the entry stating they got a Terrormorph to the events that killed everyone in the lab, only 5 days had passed, or at the least the date for the first fitting of the NCI states it was 5 days. I have assumed the first one was the only one, but maybe that is not the case. They did seem to have a lot of work done for just 5 days, and it raises the question of, if it was only 5 days, how did they manage to replicate so much material in such a short period of time? Additionally, remember when they reported that aggressive species had very low fidelity rates for the NCI? Why did they try with the Terrormorph in the first place then? I suppose progress could have been made with the technology, but if that was the case, why didn't they revisit the other species they had tried to use for Phase 1 before trying this one? Personally, I think it was hubris, with a dash of being a halfwit. This could have been why they were trying to clone dominant cells from the Terrormorph, outside of any other cloning if they did happen, altering the Terrormorph itself to suit their needs. So this was the Kreet Research Lab, a site we are sent to in order to dispatch the Crimson Fleet present here, so we can safely leave the system. However, when we arrive, a story begins to unfold, a story told primarily by Hayden Wynn, and indeed caused by his arrogance. We learn of Project Petshop, a top-secret xenowarfare research endeavor, although the results of it weren't so secret. Using a device called the Neural Control Interface, they create alien weapons they could use to enhance or augment ground troops. They had several failures before they finally got a success with the Kreet Stalkers. The Red Devils were a Martian Special Forces group that utilized these very same Kreet Stalkers in various missions up until the war ended and xenowarfare was outlawed. Before all this, however, the research team was moved to Kreet and started Phase 2. The subject of this phase was the mysterious Terrormorph, a creature encountered for the first time over a century ago on a remote moon, and it remains a mystery where it came from or how it got there. We will need more information on it before we can make a full video, but rest assured, when I have enough, I'll make one. However, when the NCI was fitted to the Terrormorph, it broke containment and slaughtered everyone in the facility, including Hayden Wynn. With what we have here in the facility, we don't know if anyone else managed to survive. The Terrormorph, however, did just fine, escaping and taking up residence at a pipeline, where a couple of VAROM members arrived to observe it, collect it. We don't yet know. Time will tell if we can connect the two. We can dispatch the creature, or leave it to its wanderings, as it was a prisoner and had the right to free itself. It's also probably for the best this facility was destroyed. Terrormorphs seem, even with just our brief encounters with them, to be extremely vicious. Rolling them into the military as weapons seems like a disaster waiting to happen. Whatever option you choose, with the destruction of this facility, a weaponized alien threat to the galaxy has been removed.